Hello, Kathy. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, how are you?
Doing okay.
Yeah. Welcome to the Global Virtual Summit 2026, Kathy. And before going to start your session, I want to introduce you to our audience.
Okay.
Yeah. Kathy Corridon is a coach, consultant, trainer, author, and real estate professional with over 40 years of experience helping non-profits, small businesses, and real estate professionals grow through strategic leadership and clear messaging. Recognized for her expertise in the senior real estate market, she guides older adults and their families through major life transitions with empathy and clarity. She coaches and trains professionals nationwide, is the author of the Can Do Chronicles and the Can Do Workplace, and holds a master's degree in psychology along with professional coaching certifications. That was a great bio, Kathy. You have done a great job, and the stage is all yours.
Okay. So at the stage is all yours, I take it.
Yes, Kathy,
Yeah.
please start your presentation now.
Pardon?
Please start your presentation now. We are on live.
Oh, we are online. Okay. Bonjour, everyone. I'm Kathy Corridon from Dallas, Texas, USA. I'm the founder and CEO of Grit and Grace Consulting. And I started Grit and Grace Consulting after 50 plus years of mission based service and 28 years of it being in leadership roles for nonprofits and for profits, but almost always with a human services focus, working with those that have extra need in our communities. One of my fundamental beliefs from all these years is that women's leadership is not just critical, it's really vital in our rapidly changing world. Yet it's so often under resourced in terms of training and providing mentoring and coaching for younger leaders to be able to move into a more intense world that we're living in. I founded Grit and Grace Consulting for the legacy lap of my career, telling my story and sharing some of the wisdom before I retire or I forget it. So the stories help us see in retrospect. They bring wisdom and perspective, but they're only good if they're acted on. And that's why I wanted to be on this stage. I'm talking about an issue that's very personal to me, and it's not exclusive to women's leadership, yet it's so very important. And I know that there are other speakers that are going to be addressing burnout too, because it's that important. So let's start going from intense to intentional. Healthy leadership is an inside game, and so is burnout prevention. Let's start where we are, not where books tell us that leadership books say we're supposed to be, but where we are. Most of the women I work with, like you, are highly competent, deeply committed, values driven, and are carrying far more than is visible to the world. I say that Yet we are often still socialized to carry emotional and relational labor, reward self-sacrifice rather than sustainability, and be praised for our grace and expected to endure without complaint. Yet we know we're not disengaged, we're not fragile, and it's not lacking resilience. I think burnout shows up because we lack resilience or passion, not because we lack resilience or passion. We are very passionate, but because we have been leading without enough authority over our time, our energy, our voice, and our choices. I want to start out by telling you a story about burnout, and it's my story. It's a 7-year chapter with 3 nonprofit leadership positions. The first was at a National Advocacy Association where I was a senior director, and it was a organization focused on behavioral health and getting equity for behavioral health. A group of committed people. To this day, we are close friends and stay in connection. Yet underneath it was a little bit of a competition to see by Wednesday who'd worked 40 hours already. We were saving the world and we were spending ourselves to do it. Then I was recruited by a small nonprofit business serving a community in New England. Sold the house. My husband had to change his job. We moved partially across the country. And I had been told several times during the interview that there was 2 years of reserves to transition to a new, smaller, more robust model. That was my job, to help move that process along. And that was very quickly discovered there was not 2 years of reserves. There were contracts that were being lost. My job title changed week to week, and my stress level went through the roof. Again, I have a group of very strong colleagues from that time, but it was because of what we went through together that our relationships grew so strong. So within a year, I had found another job, which I believed to be the job I would retire on. It was a child welfare agency, and I had been a program manager in a number of residential programs. This was my first CEO position, and I learned very quickly the difference between running a program and running an agency. I discovered issues that needed addressing, and trying to engage staff in training only built staff resentment at the new girl coming in and wanting to change everything. I wasn't prepared for that. The state, which is the funder of the organization, made different plans in what it wanted to do. It shifted its focus, and our funding became unstable. So I had many competing priorities and a great deal of stress. During that time, I was diagnosed with a chronic form of leukemia. And my doctor actually said to me, I'd be better if I could get rid of the stress. And I laughed. I left after 5 years, and I left the organization in a position to continue. But I was a shell of myself. We'd been in crisis management 24/7, played on defense most of the time. And I felt totally over-responsible for changes that were so far out of my control. Yet it was how I had learned leadership. And for a long time, I didn't understand that I went in without any real leadership skills. And the leadership programs that were out there taught you to go talk to people in different kinds of offices and power and different structures and places in the state. But it didn't focus on how do you stand with yourself when all around you, everything is going away. When I left, I was a shell of myself. And the impact goes way beyond the sleepless nights of that time, way beyond the tense meetings. I have remnants today. I'm in remission from leukemia, but my autonomic nervous system is likely permanently damaged. Can you relate to any of this? Those memories are hard for me when I look at how I treated myself and I allowed other people to treat me. We normalize burnout without really addressing the cost. And here is the critical reframe that I have found to be most helpful. Burnout is not the price of caring. It's the cost of caring without agency. Burnout is often blamed on having too much work, competing priorities, poor boundaries, personal weakness, and overwhelming stress, competition, imposter syndrome. It's not a personal failure. When we slow down and unpack, we really realize that it's more about responsibility without authority, decision fatigue, that kind of go into the default rather than thinking through decisions, role confusion and misalignment, and emotional labor without reciprocity. And there we go, that emotional labor without reciprocity. It somersaults and just gets worse. These aren't personality problems, they're leadership skill gaps, which often go untrained and unsupported. It matters because when we treat burnout like a personal weakness, we tend to give people these really good self-care thoughts. Why don't you go on a spa day? Why don't you do some retail therapy? Why don't you go on a long weekend? Have you thought about meditation? When we understand burnout as a leadership issue, we provide an opportunity to build skills. And that's a really different solution. I want to talk about agency. And I said the name of my consulting firm is Grit and Grace, and I see agency as that intersection. It is the authority over ourselves. It's not the control over others. It's the internal permission to take up space, combined with the skill to be able to hold it. It's not being louder. It's not being tougher. It's not being in charge of everybody. It's choosing how and where you lead. Many women are taught to lead with grace. Be helpful, be flexible, be accommodating, be careful of offending anybody. Others of us, like my description of the time that I was at the child welfare agency, was to push harder, endure more, and my personal favorite, prove yourself. Neither extreme is sustainable. Grace without grit leads to overfunctioning or working in a vacuum that leads to a slow burnout. Grit without grace just does that at a much faster speed. Agency is what allows leaders to hold grit and grace in balance, regulating your energy, using your voice intentionally, deciding where your time and attention can go. And that is real power in that and of grit and grace that holds them both together. Grit and grace in balance is an energy giving tension. It's not being perfect. It is being grounded in who you are and where you can be at this moment the best of who you are. Women burn out fastest when we carry responsibility without authority. We don't have all the info. That authority can be assumed or real. We say yes without making a real choice or to avoid feeling guilty or stupid. When we lead from obligation instead of ownership, when we over-identify with our work and our jobs. And that's what I did at that child welfare agency. It was a 100-year-old agency and people were trying to close it down. It wasn't going to go down on my watch. And so I was all in all the time. But here's a really powerful distinction. A leader without agency says, I have to do this. This is what's important to get done, and I'm going to get it done. But a leader with agency says, I agreed to this. Now I need to renegotiate. That sentence alone prevents burnout. It contains ownership and permission. It's agency that introduces choice, and it's choice that restores our energy. Leaders without agency can ask, what's expected of me in this situation, in this role? Leaders with agency ask, what am I choosing to be responsible for? What am I not? We don't wait for permission. We don't wait for permission to name our priorities, clarify our expectations, and push back on unrealistic demands. And pushback doesn't have to be loud and ugly. Pushback can be asking questions. Pushback can be reframing things. We may not control the outcomes, but we do control our responses. Burnout thrives in reaction mode. Agency creates intentional and authentic leadership. And it helps us move from that intense to intentional. Without agency, boundaries feel risky. They feel like disloyalty, or that we're inadequate, or we just don't get it. And we don't like feeling that way. With agency, boundaries become information. They say, this is what I can do well. This is what sustainability looks like. And this is how I can stay effective over time. Not in rigid statements, but in thoughtful responses. One of the ways that I have personally done this is that with my health issues that I alluded to earlier, I am retired on Wednesdays. I made this decision last spring. I work on Mondays and Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays. And on Wednesday, I had originally taken and read out the whole calendar, like do not schedule. And I was in conversation with a friend about it, and he said, make that green, because you're really looking at keeping yourself healthy. It isn't a negative boundary, it is a positive boundary. Boundaries don't weaken our leadership, they strengthen it. And they teach others how leadership works. If you look back at my story, I modeled some really crazy leadership. We need, as leaders, to be there to teach others how leadership works. My operating from others' poor example created a culture where others operated from mine. And that's one of the things that I feel pretty lousy about. Agency doesn't have drama. It doesn't apologize. It's clear. I have a colleague that says, if you confuse, you lose. And I think that's really important. If we don't know who we are and where we are, that we confuse other people in our communications. It's not about being perfect. It's about being authentically as much of you as you can in the moment. Agency is where identity meets responsibility. It's our values-based anchor. It's the alignment between who I am, what I value, and what I agree to carry. Burnout accelerates when we live up to someone else's definition of what good leadership is, overfunction to protect others, and sacrifice ourselves in the name of service. When we live out someone else's definition of good leadership, we are not being true to who we are and who we can be. That's the grit and grace heart from my logo. And I have it in the center because agency guides us to say, I care really deeply, and I won't abandon myself to prove it. That's grace toward ourselves and grit to meet the responsibility. That's sustainable leadership. Agency also helps us make the leadership skills that we learn into life skills and the life skills that we learn into leadership skills. Because agency, being the best of who we are in the situation we are in now, goes with us everywhere. At work, it's about decision making. It's about delegation. It's about voice. At home, it's about caregiving and about partnership and about setting limits. In the community, it's about advocacy. It's about visibility and about presence. It's about how we are and where we are in every place that we are. And when we strengthen our agency, our leadership stops leaking energy and our life becomes less fragmented. And it's fragmentation, not workload. That's the quiet driver of burnout. Fragmentation, not workload. That's the quiet driver of burnout. It allows us to be whole where we are. And I'm not talking about executive presence, and I'm not talking about the deep breath you take before you go on stage, because that's external, trying to get us to be present in a way that we communicate with others. This goes before and beyond that. This is who we are every day and how we show up where we are. It can be that we're not having a really great day and being in another contentious meeting isn't going to work. So we ask if maybe we have time to do some further research and come back to it next week. It's taking where we are and having the thoughtful presence to be able to say, this isn't going to come to a conclusion that works. Why don't we come back to it later? And it can be later in the day or it can be next week. I went back and forth about whether to include this slide, but since I was borrowing from both Brene Brown and Mel Robbins, I decided that it really needed to be included. It's not a cutesy trick. Agency begins and grows with centering and grounding. And I, for a long time, have had this framework, and then I've developed it and refined it based on both Mel's work and Brene's research. And it's that you count to 5, you take 3 deep breaths, and then that's Mel's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you go back in. It's a strategy that can be used if you're sitting in a meeting and people are driving you crazy, because it's only 15 seconds that you can just take that count to 5, take a deep breath, and go back in. You can take a quick trip to your office or the ladies to decompress and focus on what you need. The most important thing for me about this is it gives us a tool to teach others who really are struggling with overwhelm, that are really struggling with being able to be in a complex situation and be able to find the space and time to process it all and make good decisions. Our world is getting more complex, more complicated, and more stressful, especially at work. One of the important things to me is providing tools like this so that others begin to see they have the ability to center themselves, ground themselves, get in their agency. Because what that breath does, I think everybody here knows this part, is it allows you to get the front part of your brain, where you make much better decisions than the back part of your brain, engaged in what's going on. It's not perfect, but it's about having as much of you and your brain as you can to be proactive and not reactive. Agency is practiced and strengthened through 3 core leadership skills, which are also those life skills. And you can do this at home, or you could do this at work, or both. There's so much overlap in those 2 places because we bring one to the other all the time. In decision making, instead of defaulting to we've always done it this way, I really think that we need to get this done as soon as possible, you go back and you look at choosing instead of defaulting. Problem solving. You address the root causes instead of absorbing the strain. So that when you are trying to solve a problem, it isn't a Band-Aid. You can actually work back and take the time ahead to go back and really explore it. We always have time to fix a problem. We don't always have time, we think, to go back and do things the right way. Decision making is such a critical skill for us as leaders, because that's the one place where people watch us as leaders. Choosing instead of defaulting, allowing ourselves the time to ask questions and discuss. That's grit in action. That's the really important part of moving it forward with intentionality. Problem solving, getting to the root cause. That's grace, because it protects the energy and it protects us from having to clean up a mess down the line. The third one is having the hard conversations and clarifying the expectations before resentment sets in. Hard conversations are, by their definition, they're hard. Agency makes leadership visible here. Agency in sitting down and unpacking it to make sure that everyone is treated on equal grounds and has the ability to bring their piece forward, and the expectations of what the process is going to be. You want to have expectations on process, not outcome. So the expectations on process are clear and stated clearly before we have the conversation. We can hear that at home. We can hear that at work. And the thing about agency is that it gives you the resources to go from the person I'm trying to be to the person I've always known I could be. And that is huge. Their skills, and this is the important part, They're skills we rarely are supported to use on our own behalf, to make good decisions ourselves, to problem solve ourselves, to have the hard conversations, and to plan them really well. These are the three places where we can really make a difference in the burnout in our teams, in ourselves, in our teams, and in our homes. Agency, I believe, isn't about stepping back from leadership. It's about stepping into your leadership with honed skills to protect your energy, strengthen your voice, support longevity, and preserve the purpose and mission that you're working toward. Then I'm going to come back and say, to protect your team's energy, your organization's energy, strengthen your team's voice, strengthen the organization's voice, support the longevity of your team, support the longevity of the organization, preserve the mission of your team, the mission of the organization. It's the kind agency is one of those core pieces that has tentacles that go out to everywhere and really raise and bring us to a place, a new place, where participation isn't feared and people are more likely to work together. To me, agency is a core piece of culture. And as John Maxwell says, but actually it isn't John Maxwell, so sorry, but the saying is, and I can't come up with a name right now because remember I said about remembering in my memory, is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that is really important to remember in building leadership. It's about culture. It isn't just about us and who we are and how we carry ourselves. It is about supporting a culture. It's about being a role model for everyone. It's about sharing the gift of agency with everyone else in the organization. So burnout isn't the cost of caring, which I always believed it was. It's the cost of caring without having agency. Leadership with agency, to me, is grit and grace, practiced intentionally over time. And I was thinking through all the aspects of pulling this together, this presentation together. My thoughts wandered to my 10th grade French teacher. I think there was a little bit of agency and a little bit of Paris involved in that. But she remains my friend today. She has always told me, remember who I am. I've unpacked layers of that over the years, remember who I am. And it's meant different things to me over time. And when I stand in who I am, I stand in my agency. Let's all remember who we are. And let's help those we lead to learn who they are and how they can become more empowered and have more agency in their lives, so that the leadership legacy that we leave behind is one that changes generations to come. And unbelievably, I, who usually run over, am finished early. I want to say merci beaucoup. If you want to reach out to me to keep any kind of conversation going, that QR code links to my LinkedIn page. And this has been a real treat to be able to share my really strong feelings about leadership and about agency and about the potential it has to change cultures and change people's lives for the better. So again, merci.
Yes, Kathy, that was a
Yes.
wonderful presentation. You delivered your talk with a lot of energy, and we like your concept. And we have a few questions from an audience, Kathy.
Sure.
Yeah. Uh, how do you ensure your decisions are fair and effective?
Can you repeat that for me, please? Because I don't have my earbuds in.
Okay. How do you ensure your decisions are fair and effective?
I think how do I ensure that my relationships are effective?
Decisions. Your decisions are fair and effective.
Two things. One is I believe all leaders should have a coach, and that's not just self-serving. I really believe all leaders should have a coach. I have two.
Mhm.
And to always be willing to work with that coach, to look at the places that I don't see in the mirror. And the second is to be part of a network. I have the privilege of being a part of two women's networks that are both focused on women's leadership and empowerment and building businesses that make an impact and make a difference. So I'm surrounded by people who are working to move in that same direction with the same quality and the same commitment to culture.
Yeah. Thank you, Kathy. And we have few more questions, so we will directly post it to your email so you can respond there.
Okay,
Yeah. Thank you so much for your valuable time today, and please be on the backstage and join the next session, Kathy.
I will. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.